collab with, Mary Lou Williams Center, but also Duke GEO. I just wanted to get more people to study abroad, and I'm glad that you guys are all here, especially as underclassmen. We have an upperclassmen panel, so we've all studied abroad either in the summer or for a semester. So we're going to start with an introduction of where we went. So I'm Kemi, I'm a junior. I've done the Duke in Costa Rica summer program. I've also done Duke in Madrid, and I've also done Duke Engaged. So that was in the Virgin Islands. We could start with our panelists.
Yeah. Hi guys, I'm Calkin and Violet, but I go by Cal. I'm also a junior, and then I studied abroad in Madrid through the IES Madrid program last semester.
Hello, my name is Maela Kofi. I'm a junior. I did my fall semester in Hong Kong through Duke-approved University of Hong Kong.
Hi, I'm Daniel. I went to DIS and I studied in Stockholm this past semester.
I'm Jaden. I also went to Stockholm, same program, DIS, Danish Institute of Study Abroad. Something like that. But it was a great experience for sure.
Hi, my name is Zinni. I am a junior, and I actually petitioned my program, and I went to Cape Town through CIE, so if you have any questions on that.
Yes, so we've got, a range of different programs and places around the world. And so we're just going to start with some general questions to get to know kind of how we got to this point as upperclassmen who've gone to all of these different places. So, and feel free for everyone can answer the question or just a couple of people could pop in. But what is one thing that you would tell yourself, looking now, knowing what you know about Duke GEO and the possibilities of study abroad as a Duke student, that you wish you knew earlier on or as a freshman? Go ahead.
I think getting started as early as possible in the process and really seeing your options through is super helpful. I greatly enjoyed my time, but I feel like if I was more on it, I would have definitely been able to realize more options and even petition stuff like Zinni did. So that's definitely something I would fix if I could go back.
I think for me, just like add on to that, it's not something that I'd necessarily I guess redo if I was a freshman, but something that I was happy that I did was really think about, I knew I wanted to study abroad, so I made sure I looked through my 4-year plan and made sure I planned accordingly to make it happen. For me personally, it was a little bit more important because I'm a Pratt student, so I'm an engineering major, and I had to get my classes figured out, and if I needed to petition my class, do that ahead of time. And because I pre-planned, I was able to get that done, and it worked out for me.
Yeah. That actually brings us to a good question. So if you guys could all go through and just say your majors or how your study abroad program, what classes you took, or what credits you got for it, any letters of recommendation that you used, you can talk about that.
Okay, I can start off since I'm on the end. Like I mentioned, I'm a mechanical engineering major with a robotics certificate, and for me, I went through IES abroad, and because it's more of the engineer CS students go through that program, my classes, my mechanical engineering classes transferred over. Obviously it's pass-fail, but they did transfer. And then I took some other gen ed classes that just to fill up my slots that counted for my NS or social science requirements. So that's the way I did it.
I'm a neuroscience major, and through the University of Hong Kong, because it's a Duke-approved program, not all of the courses are equivalent to Duke courses. So the way I planned it was I saved all of my ALP and civilization credits so that a lot more courses that I was going to take would just easily transfer over.
So I'm a study political science, concentration in political economy. And while I was abroad in Stockholm, there was a maximum of 2 study abroad credits that would count for the political science major. Political science electives that counted to my major. And then I also took financial economics and an econ course as well that are electives that apply to an econ minor as well. So it is also kind of speaking to the undergraduate kind of department for your major and kind of making sure that if one particular class you feel works and kind of matches with a course at Duke that isn't necessarily approved through the GEO website, kind of making sure that you kind of communicate that to the person that is kind of leading your undergraduate program across Trinity or Pratt, and kind of make sure that those align in your schedule.
I am a global health and medical sociology double major and then getting the MMS certificate as well. And so with my program, because I petitioned it, none of my classes were pre-approved, so I had to go through a pre-approval process. I was fortunate enough to get a credit for like every aspect of my major. So I got a sociology credit, a global health credit, an MMS credit, and then a credit for ALP. But with that, I would just say something that's really important to focus on is just advocating for yourself, and then also just recognizing that the Duke departments are there to help you. They don't, I don't think, want to see you fail. They want to see you get, or be able to get credit abroad. And so, for example, I'm a medical sociology concentration of the overall sociology major, and so something that I had to get was a medical sociology credit. And so there was a class that I was in that was kind of leaning towards more environmentalism, and I talked to the DUS for sociology. She was like, if you write your papers and focus your content on how these environmental aspects like influence health and healthcare like abroad, then I'll give you the medical sociology credit. So just kind of taking those things into mind. Oftentimes DUSs will they'll be flexible and they will work with you because they do recognize that you don't have the breadth of courses available to you that you do at Duke.
Yeah, so similar to Zinni for my own program, when I went abroad, I wanted everything to count for something. And so that was something that I prioritized going into it. And with the Duke in Madrid program, that was a clear option for me because as a Duke in program, a lot of the credit transfers are easier. You do take some classes, not pass fail. So I took 2 classes at a Spanish university, and I petitioned for those classes. So there's already an approved list of classes that Duke says, okay, this will count for either an Econ 300 general elective, or this counts for specifically Econ 101. I petitioned for 2 specific classes that are in my MMS certificate and have those now approved. I also, for my Costa Rica summer, now I'm a Spanish minor, and so that went right into my Spanish minor. And it was, a great experience. Another thing, everyone has to overload at some point at Duke, and Duke Engage is a great way to get those credits. So I got not only a stipend to live, and, they pay for all of the flights and such, but you get credits, and that's a great way to use a summer experience to, fill that requirement out. Now we're going to ask a little bit about funding abroad and costs. So if we can ask, what are some things that might have surprised you guys financially when you were going to these different locations?
You'd be surprised how funds and costs really add up while out there. So like here at Duke, like Woo is so accessible, but when we were in Stockholm, it was kind of like we were doing our own like grocery shopping and like kind of eating out, but it ended up like we were eating a lot of fast food. The whole time we was eating a lot of fast food. So it's like it really adds up, and then like I figured this out after because I was always kind of scared to look at my bank account. But when you do like international purchases, like you get like fees on your bank account that I never really saw until like it was too late, until like I lost a lot of money. So it's just like the especially like if you're like kind of going out or like doing Ubers or like booking like transportation, they do add up. So I think that like kind of going into it, they should definitely have like a budgeting plan or like learn how to like do like some some cheap meals or like some some cooking here and there, and I think that'll save you a lot of money, especially like as you go throughout your semester.
Yeah, I just want to add on to that. I think that is something that a lot of people maybe like overlook, but it's really important to open up like an international credit card that doesn't have international fees. Like right before the summer ended, I opened one up because I was like, oh, like 3%, like tax on every single purchase that I'm making will add up very quickly. And so that's something that you should maybe like consider depending on where you're going. Back to your question, I was in Cape Town where I feel like the dollar goes maybe a little longer or further than it does in other cities in Europe. So I feel like I had a little bit of leeway with what I budgeted, but something that like surprised me was when you're abroad, your capacity and your excitement to just say yes to everything is like it's there. So like whatever you budget, maybe just budget a little bit more, or just kind of be mindful of the things that like you say and do and like say yes to and like take on, because it is a very exciting time and experience, and you want to be able to like live it to its fullest extent. So.
And then one quick thing I'll add to that for me, one thing that I did was in terms of like banking and foreign transactions, I have a Capital One card, and Capital One doesn't do that, so that was like one of like the things I was really thankful for, because I've heard some of my friends go through the same thing. But the other thing I did in terms of like just living there and like how I manage like my finances, I talked to my mom, and my mom was like, you should, you know, have an Excel sheet of like expenses and like what you're doing, especially when you're going on trips and things like that. So I found that super helpful, because like every time I'd go like on a trip, or I would do something of like some kind of excursion, I would like put it in my little Excel tracker or my Excel spreadsheet. And so that helped keep me mentally on budget and like sort of be more mindful, because I would see like a weekend, I'd be like, oh wow, that's a lot of money I spent in a weekend. Or like when you're eating out every day, or like when you grab a lunch every day in between classes, like it sort of adds up. And so depending on like the capacity that you have and what your personal budget is, just sort of like finding ways to like sort of look at it while abroad, I think is important, even though it's like really daunting to like open up your credit card like app and just see the amount that you blew. But I found that super helpful, and like I'm glad like my parents like sort of pushed me to be more mindful in that way.
Yeah, I agree with all the things my panelists said. I think especially with Hong Kong/China, the dollar does go a long way. So like even when I was hit with a 3% charge, I think it was only like 2 cents at the end of the day. But I think the biggest thing you need to not worry about, but to keep in mind is that accidents do happen, and like sometimes the worst can occur. I did end up having to like move my dorm or like my housing, and that was an unexpected cost. And that was something that I like diligently tracked beforehand, and I did have extra money, so it was fine. But that ended up cutting into some of the miscellaneous costs that I wanted to do, like traveling and such. So I would say like while you're preparing in the beginning, prepare more. Like just have a little extra at all times.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can also find funding. Sometimes there will be like scholarships, and I mean, for example, I think DIS had a few scholarships before we went, and they were like, I think it was like anywhere from 5,000 to 10,000 or something like that, and so it can make your whole experience different. I didn't end up getting it, but like it was like so $2,000. But I mean, extra money is always good, so be on the lookout for those for sure.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about scholarships a little bit later on. But yeah, I just want to emphasize, especially what you were saying, it's all about preparation. So, we're talking about spending money and tracking our spending money. Where does this money even come from, right? I started something, I knew I wanted to go abroad a semester, my junior fall semester, and so my sophomore year at Duke, I made sure that I had a lot of work shifts scheduled for my work-study jobs. I made sure I was applying to things. I had 2 jobs to save up that money, and I not only tracked what I spent, but before I tracked what I saved. I went in knowing, okay, I have about X amount of money to spend on trips. I have an emergency budget, and this is how I'm going to, track my finances. I loved my Excel sheet. I tracked every single penny I spent. And not even to be kind of like crazy about it, it was so easy to do. You could do it like at the end of the week and just go through your card. I also got an international card, so I avoided some of those fees, especially in Madrid. The euro is a little stronger than the dollar, so sometimes you'd see that conversion and be like, oh, okay, 200 euros is like $240. Who knew that? Yeah, but it's okay. But yeah, I also, the Excel sheet and the preparation was super helpful, and it's something I totally recommend finance-wise. Because another thing is when you're going abroad, you don't want to cut yourself out of all of these experiences. Like Zinni talks about, that pressure to say yes, but you shouldn't have to limit yourself just because you think, oh, I have a budget, or I don't have as many funds as some of these other Duke students going abroad who seemingly have endless amounts to spend. You can say yes to things, and there are ways to do it. I mean, we can talk about Skyscanner, for example, or all of these different budget websites where you can go on weekend trips and go to different countries. You can do activities in those countries, like zip lining. I mean, what are some of the crazy things that you guys have been able to get up to?
I went to Johannesburg over spring break there because like fall semester, spring semester there. So spring break I went to Johannesburg, which was super fun. I was able to go to different museums, go to like the only like amusement park in that city, zip line, a lot of fun stuff over that period of time. And then like even just like within Cape Town, a lot of, I mean these were like free activities, but going to the beach, hiking, taking the cable car up Table Mountain, which is like one of the like 7 natural wonders of the world, like those things were super, super cool and like very fun to do. So.
I like obviously like Denny said, like exploring like all of like the nature in Europe I think is really, really fun. There's a lot to see. But then I also did like surf lessons. I'm a really big soccer fan, so I went to a Real Madrid game and like did small things like that in Madrid. And then like on my trips I also did like other fun excursions, like within like Italy, things like that. So that was
Oh, I just want to say something. I would also kind of maybe take that into consideration as well, depending on like where you're interested in going, like the classes and like the location, but also like the size of your cohort. So for example, I was in Cape Town, and so our cohort was, I was in a different program, so like my cohort changed every 6 weeks, but my cohort was as small as 3 and as large as 30, but even that relative to other study abroad programs is small. And so something that was really nice is like when CIEE would have these excursions like planned and built into like our schedule, all of us could go. Whereas like we heard different sentiments from like, oh, I'm in CIEE Madrid and there's like hundreds of us, so like you have to sign up for these excursions and you have to be like waiting, and then when they drop it you have to be like one of the first 50 to sign up. So if that's something else that you kind of want to consider, I feel like it's like bang for your buck to be able to do the former, because we're all kind of paying the same amount like in tuition to be in the area. So it is unfortunate that you're kind of paying for that, but then have to like sign up or like rush to like hop onto an excursion. So that was something that was really nice because I was able to go surfing through like that budget. We took like a weekend trip. We went to multiple vineyards and concerts, and that was all through my program. So that was really nice.
You never know who you'll like run across. I mean, me and Jaden saw Greta Thunberg in the subway, but she didn't want to take a photo with us. So she denied our photo. But it was really cool to just see so many different types of people. There was also the Nobel Peace Prize Museum, which was really cool to see, and we always see like world leaders winning it, but to understand the history of it was really nice.
Yeah.
oh sorry.
Yeah, on that note, really stepping out of your comfort zone, I had the opportunity to do the Ha Giang Loop, if y'all saw, like online. It's basically like in northern Vietnam, just a big loop that's it takes about 3 to 4 days to travel on motorbike on. I was really not wanting to do it. Like my roommate was the one to really push me to, because I was like just watching reviews and I'm like, oh, are we, like y'all are driving in rain, shine, like it doesn't matter, in mud. And like I saw this video of like you're on the cliff. It was like really intense stuff, but just taking the opportunities, and like Kimmy mentioned, like Skyscanner, the kind of like Ryanair for Europe, I guess, and like Hong Kong had this thing called Hong Kong Express, really cheap flights, really planning ahead. And there was this one student discount that I saw, like just going through Reels and TikTok, that like gave me almost $50 off on the actual trip. So things like that, really planning it. Like if you want to do it, you will do it, and you'll find the plan, and there are resources out there.
Yeah, and Zinni, I'm glad that you mentioned tuition, because when you guys are getting to the point as your sophomores, like looking at the different programs, not only considering where you want to go, but maybe what you guys, your family, and you can afford yourself, tuition varies for all of these different programs. So you have to, one thing that I wish I knew as a freshman was to talk to more people at Duke. Like Cindy said, like these guys are here to help you. There's so many people at Duke GEO. We have a scholarship office. We have Duke GEO scholarships. Like make an appointment with either those people, your advisors, your financial aid advisors. Because I, for example, got accepted into both. I wanted to go to Madrid. So I got accepted into both the Syracuse Madrid program and the Duke in Madrid program. And off first glance, it looked like the Syracuse Madrid program, the tuition was only $30,000. Me, not understanding how any aid would carry over, thought, okay, that's, definitely shaving some dollars off of the Duke tuition. I'd rather do that, without realizing that there are fees that are applied to every program that is not a Duke program itself. So it's like, I think another $4,000 or so. And then there's also other fees that the school put on itself. They had their own visa program. We should talk about getting ahead on getting your visa for all these different places as well. But Syracuse turned out to be a definitely more expensive program, up in the $50,000. And that's something that I found out almost too late. So I was very grateful that I was able to make an appointment with a financial aid officer and, learn about that. Where there are other programs that are definitely can save or cost a lot more money. But going off of that, I'm curious if there was anybody that you guys talked to at Duke before to help you pick your program, or that you would advise other people to talk to because you feel like you missed out on that.
I would have to shout out Christine Lee. She's awesome. Oh, she's here. Oh my goodness. Yes. So I originally was going to do a Duke approved program. I was thinking about it and contemplating it over winter break, but I just wasn't excited at the prospect of the location I was potentially going to. And I just remember just taking a walk. I'm from Texas, and so I think something that was really big for me was the weather. If I'm going to be in this this new environment with new people, new cultures and customs, I would like to have some sense of familiarity, and if that's through weather, at the very least let it be through that. And so it was December and it was 90 degrees in Texas, and I just decided to check the location of where I was going to go, and it was raining and the sun was already setting and it was 20 degrees, and I checked Cape Town and it was 70 and sunny. I go, guys, I have to be here. This time next year I have to be in Cape Town. So I restarted my entire study abroad application. So most people are done by Christmas break, come back kind of knowing where they're going to get in, or soon, a week or two into spring semester, figure out. I had to start all the way from scratch. I reached out to Christine, and she was so helpful throughout the entire process, helping me find the professors that I needed to reach out to get my pre-approvals for my courses, all the questions I had about my visa and about the petition process, and just being able to have that contact within the Duke GEO world and department was very helpful, because it helped streamline this thing that I was already so nervous about, starting from scratch. And so even though I didn't know where I was going, and my whole process didn't end until closer to March, the end of March, I don't regret it one bit. I'm very fortunate that I was able to go to Cape Town, best 5 months of my life, and I thank a lot of the people in that department for being able to help me make that happen. So don't let people tell you no.
I can say something. For me, my biggest thing, and the people that I talked to were my friends who did the program or went to locations. So for me, I've always been interested in going to Madrid, and so that's why I sort of singled in on that. And also with my major and the requirements, Madrid just ended up being the best choice for me. And so what I did was I found some friends that were a year older than me. I guess, so I'm a junior, so I guess senior class. And I asked them their experience and what they did, and I asked them okay, questions of if whether it came to visa, or how housing was gonna look, what the housing options. Obviously they give you stuff that's was it really that good? All the intel that you would know by actually being there and being a part of the program. And so for me, I stressed that you guys talk to people that went to these locations or these cities that you guys are interested in, because next to the GEO staff and Duke resources, they're going to be able to give you the most up-to-date information, especially because they're the ones that went through these programs and lived in these cities. And so anything regarding the living situation, education, process for classes, or even how a class is, things like that, it's really, really valuable to get that information from people who've been through the program. So that's my biggest advice.
I think I'd also add on to that, be it someone you know, but also someone who's kind of looks like you. I think my biggest thing when I was going to East Asia was, is it going to be a comfortable space as a Black woman? So even though I did get a lot of advice from a person who actually lived in Hong Kong, I also went the further step, and someone who did the program but was also a Black and brown individual. I asked them how they truly felt being in that environment, and I think that's an invaluable experience, because sometimes you can live there, but if you're not me, we're gonna have two different experiences, and that's really important to know.
Yeah, into our next question. We're going to talk about visibility. So what were times that you guys felt maybe especially visible or invisible abroad? And how did that affect sort of your nerves going into your program? And what do you have to say in reflection on it?
Definitely. I mean, like, one of the biggest parts, or like something that, at least for me, that I noticed was like how important your network of friends and family are. Because I mean, when you go abroad, of course you're around people that you see in your classes and the people that you see in your program day to day. But most of your time, you're really spending with maybe 1 to 2 other people that you're really close with, or even by yourself at times. And so that was definitely a new experience. And at times it can be challenging because you might be used to always being around family or seeing family consistently or being close. But I think that process itself teaches you a lot about yourself, and sort of you learn to understand who you really are once you get away from what you're used to. So I think there was positives and negatives to being outside of the network that you're usually used to, but I personally liked it. I thought it was a great experience.
Yeah, I just want to add on to that. I think it's really important to have your network and your anchors of people back home. Before, at least for me going abroad, I think there was a lot of negative rhetoric around me going to Cape Town, and just the things that people would say about safety. And I remember one of the only things someone could give me advice on was, well, we've never had a student go for a full semester, but just get an Uber Black wherever you go. One, I don't know if that's financially feasible all the time, and two, that just kind of added extra nerves and pressure onto going to this place, especially because I was the only Duke student going. There was not, other than the students that had maybe done Duke Engage, which is a different time period, it's winter there, and they're going with Duke students. I didn't really have anyone to turn to, and so that was a little bit nerve-wracking. But once I got there, I think a lot of the things that are said kind of could be trickled down to a lot of places. Of course, whether you're in Madrid, whether you're in Hong Kong, whether you're in Cape Town, I think it's just really important to be vigilant. We're all foreigners in this place. We're all abroad, and so it's really important for us to understand our place in their society and in their culture. So not overstepping, listening to locals, going out with friends, and maybe not staying out too late. I think those are all things and lessons that you could have taken into any place, but I do think it might have been heightened because I was going to a country in Africa. As for when I got there, I do think that there was great senses of visibility, just given that I am a Black woman and going to an African country. Granted, there is a history of apartheid in Cape Town, so you did see remnants of it throughout society and throughout their culture, and so that was an honestly very interesting and difficult thing to face and see. But I do think that's part of being abroad and kind of immersing yourself in the culture and learning and understanding and taking these lessons and bringing them back home and educating other people in them. So that is something that I did really appreciate about my time there, because I had the opportunity to volunteer abroad and talk to women and children and organizations about the racial dynamics in Cape Town. And I think that was also a sense of visibility, just being able to talk to their people and hear their experiences. So.
Yeah, I think one way that I felt especially visible myself, I urge all of you guys, if you're going to go to a different country, especially if you're learning a language, to do a homestay. However, when I did a homestay with Duke in Madrid, I've done one before in Costa Rica. I was by myself, and then one of the girls from my program actually came with me, and we were roommates in our Madrid homestay. Definitely 2 different experiences. In Costa Rica, it was definitely we were in the mountains, so I'm in, a country of color, so everyone around me is definitely brown. They're speaking Spanish. Not many people speak English. They're seeing me more as an American coming to their place rather than a Black girl coming to their place. In Madrid, I'm seen less of it as an American because, it's westernized, it's the city. I'm seen more as a Black girl. And so just to be mindful about from you, just keeping that at the front of your mind, and just being aware of that. And again, being respectful no matter where you are, because you want to you're in a different country, it's not your home, it's theirs, and so you want to be, just giving to them. So we're going to wrap up the panel portion of this, where you guys are going to be able to talk to everybody, and we have more students, upperclassmen at the back, who've gone to different places, other European countries, we have Australia as well. But before, we're going to talk about some scholarships. I like that you talked about talking to older students, Cal, because when I talked to an older student who went to Copenhagen, he told me about some scholarships that I'd never even heard about. I was thinking, okay, yeah, I've done Duke in Costa Rica, like my financial aid carried over for that. But he talked to me about getting outside scholarships. So I'm gonna put this, let's have this come out here. This is a little list of some of the Duke, these are scholarships that Duke supports, and you can scan this QR code if you want to get this sheet up. I added the links, but there's tenfold more scholarships on Duke websites alone. And when you're considering things like these, I want to stress, I can't stress more, everyone has a different financial playing field here. So make an appointment with your financial aid counselor as early as possible, because these scholarships don't apply to everybody in the same ways. Some are going to take away from aid, some are going to add on to aid. They can all have different things. There are even scholarships or programs, like, for example, Zinni did CIE. There's a lot of CIE things where even if you just apply to something, you can receive funding and aid for that. And you want to know how that...
Yes, I just want to interject there and
Yeah.
say, this wasn't like a scholarship, but for example, CIE gave me a flight credit. So my flight to, my round trip flight to Cape Town, I only paid a total of $200 because they gave me a $1,500 flight credit. And then if you're willing to kind of, promote and market the company and the culture, that you can get money through that as well. I was a CIE ambassador while I was in Cape Town, and through making videos and just genuinely documenting my time, which I was already doing anyways, and posting them, I got $500 through that, which was awesome. And so there's little facets of opportunities there. I know, like Danny said, DIS offers scholarships, CIE also offers internal scholarships, so just also make sure to look into those databases depending on where you're going and which company you're going with.
Yes, I'm going to plug, I've been a Duke GEO ambassador for 2 years now, so I would make videos and social media content, and that was so fun. It's stuff that you're doing anyway when you're in these cool places, and then all you have to do is submit it to Duke, and they'll, pub it on their different sites, and I've received, small gifts of, $150 Amazon gift cards and things like that. So definitely plug that. But yeah, okay, so we're going to break up into our tables now. We're going to go by region, so we'll have Europe, Australia, Asia, and then Africa. And then you guys can ask more personal questions, especially for me, feel free to ask about literally anything. I'm very open.